Welcome to Never Again is Now, a podcast about anti-Semitism. I'm Evelyn Marcus.
And I am Phyllis Dimbler Miller.
Today we have the honor to talk with the Israeli ambassador to Bahrain. We will discuss the impact of October 7 on the Israeli population, the reactions to October 7 in Bahrain, and more. Ambassador Eitan Naeh is at the forefront of the Abraham Accords. He was the first Israeli diplomat to arrive in the United Arab Emirates before being appointed ambassador to Bahrain in 2021. Ambassador Naeh, welcome to our podcast. It's an honor to have you on our show as our guest.
Thank you. The honor is all mine.
So, our first question is, on October 7, Israel experienced the cruelest attack on Jews since the Holocaust. In the month after that, many Israelis were mobilized and Israel entered Gaza with ground forces. How are the Israeli people doing 4 months after October 7?
Oh, thank you for that question. Look, the 7th of October found us all deeply surprised, shocked at the surprise of the attack, shocked at the cruelty, the massacres. I don't think that we even started to grasp what really happens there. Not all stories are out yet. Not everybody is talking. There are a lot of people still in shock and trauma. And we see it especially among those who were there, either in the Nova Party or in the various kibbutzim, the Israeli communities along the border, and certainly among those hostages that already released. And God only knows what is the situation among those who are still there. But the Israelis have responded and reacted and recovered very quickly. And what we saw beyond the shock and grief was resilience and mutual help and the spirit of volunteering, of helping each other. The call for duty reached many in Israel. I think that when you look around, you see many people running away from a war zone. It's with Israelis, it's the opposite. Everybody dashed, ran back home. People bought tickets from their own money to go back to the units. From the 100% of those called, 150% have answered the call. The military at the beginning had difficulty to assign all those who answered the call and those who simply volunteered. It's a kind of a spirit that we haven't seen probably since 1973. I think that what the Israelis showed that they are united for the cause to return the hostages and to eradicate Hamas and eradicate Hamas's military capabilities, to make sure that Hamas and Gaza, the Gaza Strip, won't pose a threat again to Israel and to Israelis. I think that Hamas and Hezbollah in the north have made a grave mistake, or in the language of one of them, a catastrophic victory on the 7th. They were wrong trying to sense the Israeli spirit. They forgot their own idiom in Arabic. Maybe sometimes I fight against my brother, but when there is danger, me and my brother fight together. And they mistakenly saw the arguments, the lively, open, deep argument that we had on internal issues in Israel, and thought it's a sign of weakness. but they couldn't be more mistaken.
So you think what you're saying is the enemy, Hamas, Hezbollah, they saw division in Israel, political division, and thought now they will be weak and we attack, but that didn't turn out to be the case. Israel was not weak. Do I understand you correctly?
Exactly. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, and the countries around us and certainly our enemies who don't really grasp and understand what is democracy. So the arguments, the schisms in the society, they saw the demonstrations and they thought it's a sign of weakness.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sign of strength in a society that can argue about some very principled issues, but in face of a danger, come together as one to fight our enemies. So what they thought is a weakness is actually our strength. This is the strength of democracies. This is what democracy is all about.
Yep.
Can we just remind our audiences who are the backers or the funders of Hamas and Hezbollah?
Oh, there are plenty. The paramount among them is, of course, Iran. We found a lot of links and connections between Hezbollah and Hamas, Hezbollah, of course, Hamas and Iran. There is a unity of purpose to destroy Israel. Military training, military hardware, even technology, training of transfer of know-how. Weapons, we found weapons coming in from North Korea, Iran, some of their own production.
Wait.
Qatar, a lot of the money comes from Qatar, but that money we thought is in order to rehabilitate or to reconstruct, or money that was supposed to go to civilian projects or to pay salaries of the administration in Gaza. And there is also illegal activity with crypto. They have a lot of investments around the world. Plenty of sources for Hamas's money. But if you follow the money and you see how much money the leaders of Hamas have, they're all billionaires. Those guys sit now abroad in different countries, and they sit on billions of dollars. They're all very rich freedom fighters, whilst the people in Gaza are suffering.
So before wait, Evelyn, I wanted to make it clear. The ambassador meant that the weapons were only from North Korea, not South Korea.
No, not only. No, not only. Yes, North Korea, of course.
Okay, that's what I meant. Not okay.
Yeah.
Just you were correcting yourself.
Some weapons came from North Korea. Some from Iran. They produce a lot of the weapons themselves now. We found a lot of underground factories and underground factories that produce long-range missiles, short-range rockets, artillery shells, explosives, with, of course, technology that they acquired or learned from abroad, from outside sources, Iran, even Malaysia, and other such countries.
Thank you.
So, for instance, the European Union gave money to Gaza. Wasn't anybody of those Western countries giving money paying attention to where that money was going?
You'd hope so, but Hamas has all kinds of ways to conceal what they do with the money. They stole a lot of the money, or they stole a lot of the foreign aid that arrived for the Gazans. All, at least as far as the European countries are concerned, and other countries are probably well intended. Whether it's for hospitals or whether it's for the benefit of the civilian population. but Hamas made use of it, either stole it to its own purposes. I mean, if you look at the Hamas infrastructure, the underground infrastructure cost billions. 20 years of constructing, almost 20 years of constructing this huge, longer than the London Tube underground infrastructure, instead of building above ground hotels, schools, computer labs, to give proper services to the community, whether it's desalination facilities or electric facilities. They basically created a terror economy.
Yeah. So let's look at the country where you are ambassador to. How did Bahrain and other Arab countries who normalized relations with Israel, how did they react to October 7 and to Israel's response in Gaza?
First of all, let's start with what we had until the 7th of October. I mean, since the signing of the Abraham Accords, we were busy with building our embassies and building relationships with those countries, and almost from zero. Certainly on the public side of it. And that takes time, because you have to build relationships with people, with institutions, between governments, between business communities, between elites. We spend a lot of time trying to build people-to-people relationships. I spend a lot of time also on building economic, commercial relationships, and that takes time. It comes on 75 or 72 years of having no relationships, or on the contrary, being exposed to anti-Israel propaganda, or whatever they taught in schools, whatever they heard on the Arab media, and in recent years on Al Jazeera and other forms of media. So none of us thought that this is going to be a quick fix, and that it won't take us time. Of course, the war came in the middle, or in the beginning of such process. Clearly, it doesn't help. Clearly, people take a step back sometimes. They say, "Look, this is not the time to travel to Israel. This is not the time to do business now. It's a war zone," as it happens, and it's not unique only to the countries, the Abraham Accord countries. Our hotels are empty. Tourists are not coming. Very few businessmen are coming at this time. This is not to say that the Israeli economy suffers, or that it's not resilient, but obviously there is a lull, or there is a kind of a break that we all took. But I really have to tell you that business people still meet. Business deals are still negotiated, and some of them already been signed. In spite of trade continues, in spite of the war. Commerce continue in spite of the war. If you look at the numbers of trade between Israel and the UAE, it's nearing $3 billion a year. Bahrain is different economy, different size. Numbers are way lower, but still, the decline is not drastic, but no comparison in numbers between the UAE and Bahrain. So I'm sure that once the war will be over, we will be back at what we did before the war. Continue to build close, friendly relationships.
That's good news. And how is there is a Jewish community in Bahrain, right?
Very, very small. Very few.
how are they doing during these times of tension in between Israel and Gaza?
So a few words about the Jewish community in Bahrain, originally coming from Iraq and Kuwait in the latter part of the 19th century. There were at the peak, 1947, about 1,000 Jews in Bahrain. There are about, depends how you count, depends what time of year, about 38 Jews left in Bahrain, not always in Bahrain. They are Bahrainis, Jewish, and obviously not happy with the situation, but they are fine. They are a part of Bahrain. They live in Bahrain. They do business in Bahrain. They have businesses in Bahrain, and we haven't heard of any efforts or any anti-Semitic events, as you see sometimes in the West, in the US or in Europe. That has not been reported. That has not happened.
That's good news too.
Let's now turn to UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. And I just want to say, most of us, or many of us, have heard about the countries that are defunding, but I want to make sure that we emphasize this does not mean that Israel and its allies are against aid to the Gazians. It's not having an organization with so many individuals tied to terror networks to be the distributors. So would you like to talk about that?
Gladly. First of all, let's understand what's UNRWA. There are two kinds of refugees in the world. There is everybody else, and then there are the Palestinians. So there are two refugee aid organizations established by the UN. UNRWA is the second, and it's solely devoted to the Palestinian refugees. The only refugees that its numbers only grow with the years rather than reduced. There are two definitions, UN definitions of who is a refugee, who is entitled to receive a refugee card. One for the rest of the world and one for the Palestinians. The refugee status goes from father or mother to son or daughter, 3-4 generations forward. So that's one, I think, thing that should be addressed. UNRWA is not there to solve the refugee problem. The whole issue is under discussions. There is no doubt that there is a need for a change. There are discussions and inquiries within the UN about the events of the 7th of October. There are calls, public, of course, calls from the European Union to an external inquiry into UNRWA. 20 countries have already suspended aid or donations to UNRWA until a full investigation is being carried out and its results being presented. There is lively debates in many of these countries about the issues, as is the case also in Israel. Now, not only UNRWA, but there are other aid organizations and then even members of the press, and of course UNRWA members who belong to Hamas. We only have information about 13 of them. There are about 13,000 UNRWA workers in Gaza. So I don't know how many of them belong to Hamas. We know about 13 who actively participated in the massacre of the 7th of October. And I think that calls for internal and external checks in order to make sure that aid and aid organizations are not infested with terrorists. Another issue to be discussed is the fact that UNRWA is not just an aid organization. UNRWA is also one of the organizations that reports about the situation in Gaza. And that should be maybe separated. Reporting is one thing by a third party, and operations to be carried out by UNRWA. One has to look about the schools that they run and the curricula in the UNRWA schools. One has to look into the fact that in every school that the IDF went into, every kindergarten, every facility, every civilian facility was infested with terror infrastructure, arms caches, etc. Not one, not two, but all of them, hospitals, clinics. So that's something that should be looked into, and steps should be taken to make sure that this will not happen again. Clearly, the population needs aid. They should be given not only fish, but also fishing rods.
Yes.
But all efforts should be directed at making sure that this aid won't be turned into building terror infrastructure, whether it's cement that is used to build underground tunnels, terror tunnels, or anything else that help this terror machine that Gaza has turned into on the backs of the civilian population. Our war is not with the civilian population. Our war is with Hamas.
Yes. So, and also the school curricula that are put together by UNRWA in Gaza are very anti-Semitic, I think. Is that correct?
Yes, of course. One has to look into school curricula. When you build peaceful relationships, let me take the UAE as an example, because I think it's a very good example of what happened to the UAE school curricula since the Abraham Accords, the complete overhaul and reform that the curricula went through, the really much commendable efforts made by the UAE to bring in, to instill tolerance, understanding, teaching about the importance of peaceful relationships, what we call de-radicalization efforts. I think that should be kind of a model for all education systems who want to eradicate radicalism, hate speak from the curriculum. And yes, of course, among Palestinians. I mean, if you want to build peace, peace is not just a piece of paper that you sign. Peace is about relationships. It's about people. It's about building relationships. How can you build relationships when you teach kids to hate?
And that is what's going on for a long time in Gaza, I think.
Very unfortunately, yes. Yeah. We can see it in everywhere you look. You see it in what we catch, what the IDF is catching inside the schools, plastic toys, the curricula, the armed caches, the training that the kids are undergoing. So yes, there is a clear need to rebuild and to de-radicalize the whole society and its school system, education system.
Which, if I understand it correctly, has been the responsibility of UNRWA so far, the school system. Is that correct?
Yes, a lot of it.
Yeah. Okay.
Not all of it, but a lot of it.
That's what I don't understand. Why no one at the UN paid attention to what UNRWA was textbooks that were being distributed. I mean, this has been going on for a very long time. So why has no one paid attention to this?
Well, we complained many times. And this question should be addressed to the UN. I hope that if they look into it, whether by external EU investigators, according to the EU demand from UNRWA, an internal investigation should answer such questions. I cannot answer in their name, but clearly there is a problem. And I'm sure that when such inquiry start, we will produce whatever we have in our hands that supports what we claim.
So let's look at the West for a moment. What do you think of the many pro-Hamas, anti-Zionist, and anti-Semitic outbursts after October 7 on America's elite campuses, in the streets of Washington, D.C., and elsewhere in the Western world?
Well, this is a kind of what we call a green red coalition. Left and right, the progressive or pseudo-progressive, pseudo-liberals, and the pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist, pro-terrorism, pro-Hamas elements in the West. Some of it is evil, some of it is sheer ignorance. The disinformed, misinformed, and ill-informed come together. I mean, I think that the extreme example is a sign that we saw in one of the demonstrations: queers for Palestine or queers for Gaza. I don't think anybody told them what happens to queers in Gaza or to LGBT members of the LGBT community in Gaza. But this is the kind of I think, ignorance that we see in some corners in the West. I can also quote Nancy Pelosi, who said that she has some evidence, I don't know what she has in her hands, but that some of these demonstrations were instigated by the Russians. There is a lot to talk about such issues, but I think that it has a very high visibility, but I don't think that the support among the wider public is as high as one may think. So it is a matter of perception. Latest public opinion poll carried out in the US showed that support of Israel among Americans is as high as 70%.
Although, wait, can I just say something that's very worrisome? In those polls, they show that the younger the demographics, the less support for Israel. And so as I heard someone say, that as those of us who are older, I won't say old, die off, and especially in the United States and other countries that support Israel, this is could become a major problem if it's not addressed sooner rather than later.
A, I agree with you. B, I would only like to say that 25 years ago, I served in Chicago. And public opinion polls show the same results. The 18 to 25 or 24 were mostly anti-Israel. And the older you got, the more pro-Israel you are. Well, that was 25 years ago. So all these young students of 19 and 20 are now 45. And something happened to them when they leave university. So the question really should be directed to the universities. What do they teach the students? When you see young people shout the rhyme from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and you ask them which river and which sea. Some of the answers are nothing short of, a joke. Some of them are talking about the Black Sea or the Red Sea, or don't remember what river, what sea. So it's ignorance. It's what's cool, what's fashionable, what the friends are talking about, what the professors are talking about. There is, admittedly, pseudo-liberal discourse, I would call it, in Western societies, with all the reasons that we can discuss or not, and within the framework of this podcast. It is worrisome. But I take comfort in the fact that in the US, our biggest and most important ally, 70% of the people still support Israel. I take comfort in the fact that for the first time, an Italian university rejected boycott of Israel. I take a lot of comfort in the fact that, in spite, of course, of boycotts of Israeli products, the Israeli economy is showing very strong resilience. In fact, showing, in spite of the situation, growth of between 2 to 5% annually. And the signs are all over are positive, and certainly not as bad as one would expect from a country in war, a country under attack from more than one or two fronts. So yes, certainly I agree with you. There is a problem. It has a lot of visibility, and the perception is that the streets are against Israel. I'm not sure that this is the case among the wider public, or as we call it, the silent public.
No, I agree with you about that, and I also agree that if people leave university, they get into contact with other information and other influences, and a lot of the radicalism will probably disappear. But when I grew up in Holland, all of Holland, both the government and the population, were very pro-Israel during the 6-Day War, during the Yom Kippur War in the 60s and 70s. And the only place that was anti-Israel, actually, anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, were the universities by the time that I went to university in Holland. And from there, it went to the cultural elite and to the media. And from there, it went more and more to the general population. So today, the Dutch population is not so pro-Israel anymore, not at all, actually. Very pro-Palestinian and very anti-Israel. So I'm just worried that the same process could play out in the United States, which is a much more important country to Israel than Holland is. So I hope we will do everything, both the Jewish community and the non-Jewish environment and Israel to stop this process in America. Do you agree with my?
No, I agree with the need to do more. The question is always to do what. From my experience, there are 15 million Jews around the world. There are 350 million or more Arabs just here in the Middle East. There are millions more in the European continents. When I served in the UK, I saw numerous public opinion polls that continuously showed that support for Israel among the British is more or less the same, anything between 16 to 21%, and the same with the support for the Palestinians, with 1 or 2% less, actually. So 19%, and that was a kind of continued throughout the years that I was in London. That was during the 2014 campaign Protective Edge in Gaza. So we saw a lot of demonstrations, a lot of efforts to boycott Israel, and still the support among the British, the wider British society, and again, among the more silent societies. And you can see it, for instance, when you look into the readers' letters to the newspapers Daily Mirror, Daily Telegraph versus letters to the Guardian, left and right. You see many more pro-Israel letters to the editor in these first two newspapers. So I'm not saying that there is no problem. Of course, there is a problem. There is a critical problem, and we all saw it on TV during the hearing in Congress. We hear it, we see it. We try to do as much as we can. There is more to do. We deploy quite a lot of what we can do. We cannot compete with other countries who pool billions into it. But I think that you know what? Even if you look at cost effective, I don't know if, and I was asked once by an Israeli deputy prime minister, he said, if I double your budget, will you be able to bring better results? And I honestly couldn't answer that question. I don't know if you double my budget, I can bring better results. It's a numbers game. But if you take the amount of money that the other side spent on the rent-a-crowd, and on all that they do on the streets of Europe and America and on campus, to the results, overall results, I'm not sure that you will think that they are that successful. But again, I emphasize, this is not to say that there is no problem, or I think that I'm trying to belittle this problem. But I have to be pragmatic. Take Britain, 350,000 Jews versus millions of pro-Palestinians, probably Muslims, who are ready to go to the streets. And our supporters may not be on the streets, may not be willing to go to the streets, but deep inside, as is shown continuously in different public opinion polls, are not so anti-Israel.
So as we come close to the end of this very, very important podcast interview, is there anything that you would recommend for those outside Israel individually to support Israel? You know, giving money is one thing, but what else can people do?
One of the battles that we fight is really it's about information. It's about knowledge. It's between the old ways of acquiring information against the Twitter and TikTok, where young people take most of the information, and of course false information, fake news, and whatever else. Everybody today has a megaphone, and everybody, every influencer, 15, 19-year-old, have tens of thousands of followers for this or that reason. And it's all out there, and you'd be surprised or not, how easy it is to persuade people, give people or feed people with disinformation. So I think the first battle is about having access to proper, objective information, and then to educate oneself, educate one's family, close friends about the situation, understanding the limits of the media that we are exposed to, understanding that when you see a 30 seconds or 60 seconds short video, you only see, by definition, part of the truth. And that it's a lot of time is subjective. I see a lot of media outlets quoting journalists from Gaza. How objective do you think a journalist in Gaza who wants to continue to cover whatever happens in Gaza can be? There are enough stories already from 2014.
Not just continue, but not be killed. Let's be honest here.
Some of the stringers are pro-Hamas or members of Hamas. I think that an AP reporter who reported from Gaza during Protective Edge in 2014 wrote a very interesting article about what was going on in Gaza, where just outside the offices of AP, Associated Press, news agency, Hamas was firing rockets and then came rushing into the AP offices and threatened the staff of not reporting it. So one has to understand the overall picture. And again, you can only do that if you are well read. I think that if you support Israel already and you're knowledgeable, go to events, go to pro-Israel events, create events when you inform others, write, contribute to the community by writing in social media, far and beyond your chat box or your own community. I think that this is, of course, arrange visits to Israel, come to Israel, talk to people, talk to Israelis, invite Israelis to talk to you, invite Arabs to talk to you, and form a view that is a learned view rather than a view that is based on misinformation or even disinformation.
Excellent, excellent advice. And do you have any last words for our audience before we end this podcast? Is there anything that you would really wish that you'd gotten to say that you haven't?
Look, Israel got a blow on the 7th of October. I think that the whole world was exposed, whether they want to believe it, whether they accept it, to what Hamas has done. Not everything is out yet. Some of the things will take time to get out. We just had here in Israel a visit by the UN investigator for sex crimes. I think she was deeply disturbed from what she heard and what she saw. It will take time for testimonials to come out. Not everybody who was hurt is ready to talk about it, and that will be probably a big issue about what happened to women and men.
Yes.
During the 7th of October. I don't understand how women organization, the Me Too movement, has kept their mouth shut in view of the evidence that already came out. What Hamas did to women, it's horrific. Just reading about it, let alone seeing it, is shocking, and not for everybody. I think that the world sees that, yes, we want peace, but peace in order to achieve security. If we can't achieve security, peace has got no meaning. Peace in itself has no meaning if it doesn't bring security and economic prosperity. And you cannot have economic prosperity if you don't have security. And I think that it will take time for the Israeli society to heal and to from what happened in the 7th of October. But we are already coming out stronger, united, unity of purpose, and by making Israelis suffer, you don't make Israelis, you don't defeat Israelis. Making us suffer doesn't defeat us. It only makes us stronger. And sometimes I suspect that all that Hamas wants, all that those guys want is to make us suffer. No peace, but rather make us suffer. And I think that in that, we show them that there's no chance. Making us suffer doesn't mean you defeated us. And that is the message. On the contrary.
that's an excellent way to end. We thank you very, very much for this engaging conversation. We thank our listeners. For those of you who want to know more about Evelyn and myself or our activities, you can go to Never Again Is Now podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And before I give our traditional closing, I want to add one closing, which is to bring the hostages home. And then our traditional closing, which we always say, please speak up against anti-Semitism and all hate.